Thank you very much. Noel, the board of directors, and all the members that may have had anything to do with this. I'll tell you about Daisy in a few minutes. But I want to thank you all very much. I am honored to receive the prestigious Foreign Policy Association Award. I'm also honored to be in the company of the previous nominees, a very prestigious group. I'm trying to figure out how I got in. The Foreign Policy Association was actually funded in 1923 and committed to the study of all sides of international questions affecting the United States and to educate not only the informed citizenry, but to be a valuable tool for our government officials. They help provide us, they help provided me, they help provided all diplomats, and their efforts are invaluable. President Kennedy once said, "The complexity and the multiplicity of the foreign policy questions facing the United States today places a premium on intelligent understanding of the issues by the widest possible cross-section of citizens. I'm particularly impressed," he said, "with the approach which the Foreign Policy Association has taken." I agree with him even more so today. Now, when President Obama called me to ask me to become what I consider being ambassador to the Court of St. James, I said very quickly yes, and he wanted to know if I needed to think about it. And I told him, no, I didn't want him to change his mind. But I would also tell you that it was not without some drama. It's the best job in the world, trust me. And I was in Washington going through orientation, and as a background, when you're the ambassador, you live in the residence, which is on 17 acres in Regent's Park, beautiful gardens, tennis court, 35 rooms, 15 in staff. It's not a bad gig. So I'm there, and this woman walks in, and she says, Mr. Susman, I wasn't even an ambassador yet, she said, "The president's on the phone for you from Air Force One." Everybody in my class was stunned, as I was stunned. I had no idea what it was about. So I went, and with great trepidation, I picked up the phone, and I said, "Mr. President." And he's kind of giggling. And he says, "Louis, it's Barack. I'm on Air Force One. I'm just coming back from London from the G8. I said, "Well, great. What's the call about?" And he says, "Well, I got bad news for you." With that, my heart drops to my shoes. I said, "What's that?" He says, "I've decided to go a different way." I said, "I beg your pardon? I've already told my mother, my family, everything." He says, "I've decided," and he's giggling, "to name myself the ambassador of the Court of St. James. I like your house better than my house." And I said to him, "Mr. President, we're both from Chicago. A deal's a deal." And then I went and threw up. And during the other trauma, and I'll always remember during those 2 weeks of supposedly orientation, there is this big meeting in the security aspects of the diplomatic corps. And I was getting 24 hours, round the clock security. And they were explaining to me as the U.S. ambassador, I had to sit in the back seat on the left side. There was a security man beside the driver, and then there's a backup car with 4 other people loaded with guns and everything. And they said, because if there's a problem, we can pull you out on the left side closest to the curb and throw you in the backup car. I said, well, that's pretty good. And my wife said, well, if I'm in the car, what about me? And the guy turned to her in the British-Scottish accent. He says, "Madam, we'll do our best. That was my second drama, because she turned to me and she said, after many years of marriage, "It ain't gonna work, Buster." I want to say a moment, too, about my friend Daisy Soros. I know you don't want it, Daisy, but you'll love it. Daisy is a force among herself, whether it's in philanthropy or in anything she does. She does it beyond the pale. I would suggest to you that she and her late husband, my wife and I, were very close. It was some joy to be friends and sit around our houses in Nantucket and especially listen to Paul. But I'm going to tell you something about Daisy you don't know. Daisy is a political predictor. Every year at my house, we have a political poll. Who's going to win the Senate, this and that, what the economy is going to be. And I give a bottle of Dom Perignon. She won it 3 times in a row. The 4th time I told her, maybe she'll get a Coke. But she has a keen mind, and most important, she's so close to her friends, and I feel honored, not only by this association, but by being introduced by you. Thank you, Daisy. You know, ladies and gentlemen, today we live in a very, very vulnerable world. Informed diplomacy has never been more needed. The termination of the Iran nuclear agreement caused Secretary of Defense Mattis to say, quote, "Unless we have a strong diplomatic effort, that I'm going to have to buy more bullets," unquote. I am most pleased with the commitment of Secretary Pompeo to revitalize the State Department, which had been downgraded by Secretary Tillerson's plans and by the Trump budget cuts. The last time I was at the State Department, the 7th and 8th floor, which are the executive floors, which houses the deputies and assistant secretaries, was void of people and had empty offices. Ambassadors were missing in both major and minor countries. At the present time, we still don't have an ambassador to South Korea during these delicate negotiations with the North. This administration has simultaneously expressed a disdain for diplomacy and seems content for the United States to take a backseat in international affairs, to the consternation and worry of our allies and the delight of our competitors. But I want to first take a step backwards and remind the readers and the audience that our wisest leaders, Democrats and Republicans alike, have always understood that America's foreign policy must be shaped solely on the basis of what we are for, not what we're against. I feel this very strongly. And our interests still dictate that we should be for a world in which democracy is defended and universal values are upheld. Ladies and gentlemen, under anybody's imagination, the world is in disarray. Our relationships with our allies in Western Europe and the EU are at an all-time low. The intervention of the Trump administration in the German immigration issue has threatened further to cause not only tension between our relationships, but has minimized a very strong leader in Mrs. Merkel. We have, in my opinion, a totally dysfunctional foreign relationship with Russia. With the disruption of our elections in 2016, by the aggression in the Crimea, these are instances that are not even being criticized, but being accepted by this president. Instead, there seems to be a great admiration for the strength of Mr. Putin. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a trade war with China. And from Africa to the Middle East, there is no leadership for peace and for guidance and for help that so many countries around the world need. On the domestic front, the dysfunctionality of our Congress and the President's leadership leaves us in a political deadlock with nothing worthwhile being accomplished. Our history, think about it, of welcoming immigrants. We're a country of immigrants that is being severely tested with travel bans, immigration deportations, and worst of all, the recent policy of separation of families at the border. This is not the American I know, nor is it the America I want it to be. The world is crying out for the need for leadership and diplomacy, the need for real debate, an attempt to people to have reasonable compromises by our government on both sides. We cannot accept the status quo. I've often been asked whether I'm an optimist or a pessimist. Well, I will reply, I'm an optimist that worries a lot. And right now I'm worried about a lot of things. The US-UK relationship, for an example, has always been a special relationship, and it's in threat at the moment. Our president is going over in July, and the last time he was going over, 3 million people signed a petition not for him to come. It's the president of the United States. It's the UK. It's Churchill. It's the Second World War. We must not accept the status quo. Serving as ambassador to the Court of St. James was one of the highest honors of my life. To represent our country is a privilege, not an obligation. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for being here tonight to honor me. And as they always say, God bless America. Thank you.